Floor is yours. All right, good afternoon, and we're going to call the meeting to order. I'm going to ask Representative Johnny Chastain to open us up in a word of prayer.
Okay, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for this day. We thank you for the many blessings of life that you bestowed upon all of us and this beautiful weather. And we just ask that you be with us, lead, guide, and direct us as we conduct the business of the state, and help us to always include you in our decisions. In Christ's name we pray, amen.
Okay. Thank you, Representative. First on the agenda is adoption of the rules. These are the basic rules you've seen in other committees. Do I hear a motion we accept the rules?
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. All right, that motion carries. So we have some rules. All right, first on the agenda we have Representative Scott Hilton. He's going to present Senate Bill 23. This is LC 540209S.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's an honor to be here this afternoon. If a committee was a spirit animal, this would be my spirit animal here. I can just tell you guys are, this is a fun committee here. I was hoping you'd have no rules. I love this committee. As many of you know, I was the director of the Jordan's First Commission for the Office of the Governor, and our job was to take red tape to take a chainsaw to red tape and eliminate needless items from our code, our regulatory code. And now today we get an opportunity to do the same with our legislative code here. So I love this committee, love the work that you guys do, and bring to you today Senate Bill 23, which was passed out of the Senate a couple weeks back unanimously, was carried by Senator Kay Kirkpatrick, and we talk a lot here about cleanup bills. This is kind of the ultimate cleanup bill. The Senate, when they got sworn in, one of the first deals they went through is we got to appoint people, and they went through and found out consequentially there's a lot of needless committees and commissions that no longer exist or do anything anymore. And I'll walk you through quickly what some of those are. My favorite, I think, is the World War I Commission. I think that's been over for a little while now, but I'll walk you through it real quick. Section 1 and 2, this is a committee name correction in Section 1 and 2, so you'll see those names change there. If you flip to Section 3, this authority, the Georgia Education Authority, is not operational anymore per the Department of Education, so we'll be eliminating that. The Section 4 has the Georgia Rail Passenger Authority Overview Committee. That is no longer operating. You move to Section 5, and I skipped over Section 4.2, and I'm going to go back to that in a minute. But if you go to Section 5, that deals with the Palliative Care Advisory Council. We've learned they haven't met since 2020, and really haven't received much communication from them over the last several years. Section 6 is Partnership for Public Facilities. This is a great note here. No one knows what this committee is, and it is not operating. Like I said, Section 7 is my favorite, the World War I Centennial Commission. This commission is over and they've finished their work, so we're removing that. Section 8 is the State Personnel Oversight Commission. Again, we've asked, no one has claimed any kind of responsibility. Section 9, the Small Business Assistance Advisory Council. We learned that this council is no longer operating, no longer meeting, no longer doing anything. Same with the Commission on Regional Planning. It's no longer in operation. The Commission on Preservation of the State Capitol. That commission is no longer operating. And Section 12, finally, is a name correction. I did want to go back briefly to Section 4.2. We were asked by leadership, the Speaker's office, to add in comments there. You'll see it removes the ability to pre-file legislation prior to the General Assembly convening, both saving our legislative counsel and our clerk's office valuable time and resources. So with that, I will open it up for questions from the committee.
All right. Any questions for Representative Hilton?
Could I just inquire if we're operating off the same LC number?
Sure.
LC 540209S?
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Who's number 9? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Number 9 is him, but he's
Okay.
not blinking. I'm blinking.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, colleague. It appears as though when you were calling off some of the later sections that they were not lining up with these sections, unless I'm the only one that don't.
No,
have the
you're very
right
good.
title.
Yeah, I apologize for that confusion. My notes are from a previous version. I think because of the addition of section 4.2, that's kind of gotten everything. The content remains the same. It's the same boards and commissions, maybe just different sections. So good catch. Yeah.
Okay. 3. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Hilton, for bringing this question for Section 4-2 for taking out pre-file legislation. You know, we certainly know that you know, our legislative council does a lot of the work to kind of prepare this. Does it? Does this? This doesn't actually limit their ability to draft. It's just making it available before we go into session.
Yeah, so great question. So we found there's a very duplicative process. So yes, today, say you get elected in November, next day you can go, hey, Legislative Council, draft this bill for me. They can draft it. As it stands today, November 15th and later, up until session, you can pre-file a bill that gets a different backing than what a typical bill does. And then you actually you can pre-file it. You'll get House Bill 1, or whatever the number you're assigned. And then you actually have to file that bill again once we're in session. And so what'll happen oftentimes is we'll get here in session, maybe a month into it, someone finally gets around to, I think I'll file HB 1 now. And, you have to go around, get a different backing, file it again. But no, it gives you today, you still have the ability to go to Leg Council, they draft you up something, and then day one, literally we get down there, you put it in the hopper, and it's good to go. So, yeah.
Thank you.
We've, just for some historical background, we've had pre-filing, we haven't had pre-filing. So this is just going back to not having it again, yeah.
All right. Representative Chokers.
Scott, thank you for bringing this bill, and I do appreciate the importance of eliminating some of these old regulations. I wanted to talk about 2 items. One was the palliative care. If I'm not mistaken, that was former state senator and now Congressman Buddy Carter had started that and most of that deals with end-of-life issues where they're taking care of patients. And to your knowledge, that has not been manned or meeting or appointments made to that commission?
Yeah, good question. And I think we may have somebody in the audience who may testify that on that this afternoon. But yeah, according to the notes and the research done on the Senate side, the committee itself hasn't met in the last 3 years. There's been no activity. I believe DCH reached out to say, hey, do you need us to appoint anybody? And questions went unanswered. And so it was determined that, this is probably not something that's of value, right? Obviously.
So the budget, so it still fell under the budget of DCH, and they just haven't been using it, or?
Yeah, and again, whoever's here to testify, they may or may not actually have a budget. Some of these have budgets as small as $400. So I don't know if they have a appropriated budget or not, but just due to lack of activity, the cause, I should say, is probably worthwhile, but I would question maybe how worthwhile if there hadn't been a need to meet in the last 3 or 4 years.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, and the second question that I have is dealing with the passenger rail system.
Mm-hmm.
Is there would that and the reason I say that is we have actually a rolling state park in my district, the Sam Short Line, Heart of Georgia, Hog Railroad, that's the name of it. And it's stationed at Veterans State Park on Lake Blackshear and travels from there to through Americas, through Plains to the Boyhood Farm, and is operational. Would this in any way affect that?
No. So your train has been operational, I assume, for a number of years.
It has.
The authority that's named here has not been in operation for a significant period of time. So
Gotcha.
there's really no just any kind of awareness of, a lot of these you kind of reach out who, what, where, when, and there's nothing. So it's really just kind of dead legislation or code section. And really what, I love what you guys do is revising the code to clean up a lot of this stuff. So call me a code nerd. If I'm lucky
Good.
enough to win again, I hope I get considered for.
Good.
Code
Well,
revision.
as I said, both of those issues are pertinent to my district, and so I wanted to find out more about it. But
Good
thank
question.
you very much. I appreciate you bringing the legislation.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
As a code nerd, are you surprised this isn't 15 times thicker?
It could be 15 times thicker. Yeah, this was just immediately what bubbled up to the surface. As I said, the lieutenant governor's office, they got up to speed, and the lieutenant governor, the House Speaker, the governor, they make a number of appointments throughout our state. And so this was just an immediate kind of finding of theirs that, hey, we got to appoint people to boards that no longer exist or are operational. Why don't we just strike them? So, yeah, I would encourage this committee and its members to let's dig deep, and because I'm sure this is just scratching the surface, to be honest with you. No.
At the appropriate time, sir.
Okay. We have somebody that wishes to testify on the bill. Tammy, I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name.
Okay, so palliative care. Thank you. I'm glad that there are code nerds and there's some doctor nerds around. Thank you. So my name is Tammy Quest, and I'm a palliative care physician. I'm actually the current chair, if you will, of the council, and would like to speak to a little bit of sort of our nascentness. Our actual last meeting was March 23rd of 2021. That was virtual. Those minutes don't appear to have been filed, so at least it has been a while. What we were experiencing during the pandemic, as you can imagine, the providers in palliative care took care of the patients dying in the state of COVID, and the pandemic had a significant impact on the ability for any of us to have attention and focus. And many of the members so the non-legislative members were all clinicians. And so we found it to be a continual barrier to get a quorum, as well as the fact that some of our appointed members to the council, who had been some of Senator Ralston's appointments, it was just an untimely and difficult time to get reappointments. And so we essentially had two issues. One is losing quorum and composition, and the other is us having incredible focus, as you can imagine, on taking care of Georgians at end of life, suffering the worst crisis that we've seen. So what we would respectfully say, if you actually go and look at the work of the council, look at the minutes, look at what is on the DCH website, which gives information and support to Georgians who are facing serious and end-of-life issues. That was the work of the council. Everything you see on the DCH website there with our expertise and input, and that's the focus of the council. Currently, there are 230 hospice agencies in the state of Georgia that are largely unregulated, and quality is defined at this point as the Medicare hospice benefit, and we believe that Georgians deserve not only those federal regulations, but the ability for us to have a community that can support quality and safety and education for patients and families facing serious illness. At this point in time, we have emerged. I think that really 2023 is the ability for most healthcare workers who need to do this work to be able to emerge and refocus. And I will, fall on the sword as the chair, having been frontline and taking care of many folks. And maybe it was my responsibility to get the committee and keep it going. As you can imagine, there were multiple barriers there, and so I will, personally pledge. I actually re-signed my oath, and at some point along in there, and would be, willing and able to resurrect this council, including working with DCH and our other legislative partners to get reappointments, because as the charter is written, a certain number of them have to be legislatively appointed. And as you can imagine, this is, of course, in a time in this state when we were working on so many things, was not the highest priority item. And so I am, remiss that actually, DCH and, we've had a sort of crossing of non-communication, but Brandy Sylvan and I have been in touch, and just wanted to appeal and ask for this to be not part of the cleanup, respectfully so, as a service to Georgians in our community facing serious end-of-life issues. Thank you.
Okay, you have a question about the Quest.
Yes.
Representative Hall?
Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming to give your testimony. As you understand, sitting through this, that this committee is works well with at least trying to just make sure that we can simplify the code, and we get to do that in a careful balance, not to trample on people, because I don't think that's the intention here. I was curious if Georgia Palliative Care is stricken from this. What might likely be the result and its impact to your organization?
Yeah, so I guess I would say it's not a specific organization, but it would be the practice. So the way of thinking about this, the advisory council was, as was talked about, was a very sort of long, hard-fought sort of battle to be able to establish a group of individuals, including legislative and community members, to advise DCH on matters of palliative care. So there's not a single constituency, if you will, but it is a group. The advisory council is to advise DCH. And so I believe that if we did not have how we got there was for good reason, and I don't think that any of those reasons are different today than they were in 2016 when this was passed. Really, I think the impact of this would be, you would certainly not have the information that you have right now. If anybody goes to the DCH website and puts in Georgia Palliative Care Council, you're going to see a number of resources for patients and families. I think that the impact will be on Georgians and not on individuals. We all have plenty of work, as you can see, that happened during the pandemic that we had to go take care of. But I believe that if we don't have this, I think the impact is not on individuals who are stakeholders in having such a thing, but it's on Georgians and their inability to get what they need. For instance, children. So when we look at children who have serious illness and end-of-life issues, there are things around open access and how Medicaid is sort of working with those things. And so we had somebody from pediatric palliative care who was helping. So I believe that the impact is on Georgians, not on any individual organization, and that was the goal of a council. Nationally, it is now standard, if you will, that states really have this. Probably 3/4 of states in our nation have councils as such to be able to advise the legislature and others on matters of serious illness and end of life. And so we want to just get back to the work of doing that, and are remiss that we fell into the inactive category.
Well, and that's just a small follow-up, and then just with respect to that, the inactive category, and and maybe this is something either you or Scott, if you could answer, what criteria is necessary to be considered inactive to the extent of being removed from the code section?
So it requires that you have 2 meetings per year, is what the code states for the bylaws for the council. That didn't occur. However, those 2 meetings must have a quorum. You can't hold a meeting without a quorum, and we were in a cycle of not being able to have a quorum of individuals, based on all of the factors. And so being able to put the energy and effort of that reconstitution and making sure that we went through the process of getting those individuals back on the council was just a harder task, I think, than we could all surmount under the circumstances. So that is the minimum requirement based on the bylaws, is 2 meetings per year with a quorum. And that was the cycle that we fell into. But I believe that that can be corrected. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember the legislation. I was here at that time, and I remember how important it was and how DCH supported it. And if I'm not mistaken, there was no additional funding for it. It went through the budget of DCH. So we're not talking about any money from the appropriations aspect. But I'll tell you where I'm concerned, and I recognize the difficulties we faced during COVID. It seems to me that during COVID, when we had more illnesses and more situations where this organization needed to really be active and engaged, they didn't. So why should we consider not, taking this off when maybe we'd have to look at it again next year? Because one of the things, if I'm not mistaken, is there was certain criteria, requirements for the members of this committee, and the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker were all required to appoint certain members, and these are pretty specific. And there may not have been a lot of people with those qualifications in the state of Georgia to be able to serve on those committees. And I guess the long and the short of it is, what's going to prevent this from, why do we have the revelation now that we're taking it off the books? It should have, if it's as important as you say, and I believe it is,
Yeah.
it should have never been on the list of being inactive.
Yeah, so let me just respond to a couple of those points. Thank you. Very good point. So let me give you an example of one of the most impactful things when we did meet in March of 2021 that we did do was to give guidelines for witnessing requirements during COVID for advanced directives, and the ability to complete an advanced directive via video. And not having 2 witnesses. So, for instance, that was something impactful that we contributed in March of 2021. That was timely and important, and one of the most important things that we did contribute. So, I just want to say that that was sort of a high priority item. What we do know is that palliative care has grown since 2016. And our workforce has grown in the state. Our number of individuals who would be qualified has certainly grown over the last 7 years. And we do believe that we have a number of individuals that could meet the criteria. So I do hear that concern, but I do not think that it is so restrictive that we could not. I will say that during that time period, and I just remember working with DCH and trying to work through those channels, because I'm not a professional legislative individual, that trying to just go through those processes and get the attention of making sure these things happen. I just think that we lost our quorum in just a difficult period of our state's history. So I believe that if we were saved, if you will, that if we continued to stay inactive, that of course this would be something to be considered. It's interesting that even before this, I had reached out to DCH to start talking about doing the quorum process. So I just didn't know that this was a possibility, if you will. And again, that's not an excuse. That's just what happened. So I guess I would just ask for a reprieve and a reassessment, if you will, from Representative Hilton here to maybe look at us, and if we're not doing anything in a year, bring us back to the stack.
Mr. Chairman, may I have a follow-up? Yes, sir. How many members of the committee do you have with you here in support?
Physically, I do not. It turns out that today, right now, is the Georgia Hospice and Palliative Care Association meeting in Athens, Georgia, and so I'm here, and my colleagues are there. And I will just say that I've been in touch today with Paula Sanders, who's the Georgia Hospice and Palliative Care Organization president, and others, and we would just, we stand in solidarity to say that we did not foresee this as a consequence, and certainly if we thought it would be, we certainly would have been more aggressive, or I would have been more aggressive. I will use an I statement because I'm the one standing in front of you. Been more aggressive in working with others to try to get our quorum, but we can certainly start on that.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no more questions. Thank you, Dr. Quest, for
Appreciate it.
for your input, and we
Thank you.
appreciate your service to the state of Georgia. Representative Hilton. Okay. Okay. All right. Just a minute, if you'll go ahead and.
Yeah, I
No,
appreciate Dr. Quest for coming this afternoon. I would submit to you, it's fantastic what she does. Great cause. There's a number of great causes we obviously have here in Georgia, and I would just ask the committee how many of those need to be state-sponsored, state-sanctioned with appointees and all the rest. Many of us know, and we serve on in our own communities, councils, boards, nonprofits, associations, that support organizations like this. And so I would just ask the committee, does this rise to the level of requiring governor appointees, House appointees, or is this something that couldn't be a private sector council or commission? I would also submit to you anything that needs to be resurrected might want to be kept dead. Sorry for the palliative care analogy there, but COVID was one of the greatest times in our state where we had a need for this type of organization, and it concerns me that they were dormant during that time when our seniors and those were dealing with a global pandemic. And so I understand. I would also question the need, the not having a quorum. There may be a reason for that it didn't rise to the attention of those in leadership that, additional appointees were needed. So those are just some of the questions and concerns I would raise. If the committee sees right, I'd be happy to discuss an amendment if you'd all like, and we can go from there.
Okay. Representative Panich?
Thank you, Chair. I believe I'm sure the reason, as the doctor testified, that they couldn't get a quorum is because they were caring for people who were dying because of COVID. So, I mean, I'm willing, I have an amendment if it's the right time to offer one. Or I'll move do pass.
A motion.
I move do pass.
Okay. All right. Got a motion to do pass. Do I hear a second? Second. Got a second? Any discussion on that motion?
Is that,
Okay.
oh, yes, I have an amendment.
All right, yes, ma'am.
I would move to strike section 6.2.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
Or all of section 6, thank you. Yes,
And I just want
Forgot what she
to,
just said.
yeah, if I could get clarity, because I'd personally like to know if they didn't have a quorum because of lack of appointees or because they were, I don't want to testify on your behalf, yeah.
We were missing a legislative appointee of Senator Ralston's, and we had one community, and well, actually, all of them are appointees, right? So we had, I think we're missing two members, 2 to 3 members, that we need to reconstitute at this point.
All right,
And then we need to just confirm the current
he
legislative
name?
member sheet, so.
okay, all right.
may I ask Legislative Counsel a question about her suggestion? Do we need to strike anything more than 6.2, 6.3, and line 209?
Well, I think that this is all dealing with the repeal of that council. So it's not appearing in like section 6.3 because we're repealing all subsection D. It's not laid out, but that's probably because that council is mentioned in there. So I would say all of part 6 is dealing with taking the council away, so let's take all of 6 out, if that's what your goal is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that,
They wouldn't be in here at all anymore.
Okay.
okay?
Yeah, that's the-
I would have a question then for the legislative
All
council.
right, just a second, I'm on, Chairman Chokers.
Thank you. As I said, I remember this legislation, so to bring some clarity to it. They were not only professionals, but they were lay members of the council, representatives of families and lay members that were not providing healthcare services during the COVID and that are not present in this room. The second thing I want to say is eliminating the council does not eliminate DCH from forming their own committee to follow up on all of this. By eliminating the council, DCH still has within its power and its domain the ability to talk about palliative care and how to deal with it and how to provide that service for the citizens of Georgia. So I would,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also submit that there's nothing that prohibits this group from continuing the work of their council without having state sanctioned authority and continue to do the great work that I know they're doing out in the community right now. My question for Legislative Council on Section 6 is our intent was also to eliminate the Kidney Disease Advisory Committee, which was,
Yeah, so if you want to actually do everything but 6.4, but then on 6.4, keep the council in there.
yeah.
Everybody understand? That's.
Could you say that one more time?
So
On line 209, we're gonna unstrike, and then remember, but you're still gonna take out 205 and 206, you're still gonna have those strikes. So that will stay in the bill.
thank you.
Yeah, the other two, the Kidney Disease Advisory Committee was abolished by statute in 2020. The Office of Women's Health reporting requirement was abolished by SB 372 in 2020. So that's purely just cleanup, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, Representative Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you could clarify for me, Scott. Now, I think we all appreciate the institutional wisdom of our brother Mike Chokas here, who's been here to see this play out. Because, and I understand as well that you have a desire to see that we can have a code that is limited and making sure too that we don't have waste, right? I'm curious as to how much has actually been expended, if you actually have that knowledge, how much has actually been expended for being able to ensure that this named council is still relevant for the time being when it was actually written into the code?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in my comments, there's literally hundreds of boards, commissions, committees that we have to appoint as a legislative body and our leadership. And so I can't point to, and she may be able to speak to their budget that they're appropriated, but I can tell you just from a time and administrative standpoint, you've got to find folks who fit certain criteria. They're in the community, willing to serve, and then get them appointed and sworn into these boards. And so I think we've seen by the fact that, it's been 2 years and we haven't been able to appoint someone to this board. Again, it just kind of raises some red flags for me.
I think, and I see the red flags that you're saying, that, you would want to see that they're meeting, that there's some sign of life. And I think probably you've also seen, I think all of us have, the minutes that we've had to wait to try to get quorum in here, right? So we're kind of aware of that. If Dr. Quest has specified that the board members, of which, how many of those board members?
Sorry, I have to pull out the exact.
Just general.
It's about 9.
Okay, so if those 9 board members, for instance, are meeting today in Savannah, that quite possibly it's a sign of life. For being able to take care of, you said children who are facing end-of-life consequences?
Children and adults, yes.
Okay. Might this be something, Representative, that, perhaps with a more thorough study, like for instance a later study committee, that maybe then if it's determined that this 9 or so board member group was not actually satisfying the needs to be recognized, that then it could be omitted from this?
Well, if we admit it today, they're always welcome to come back and petition the legislative body to say, hey, look at us, this is a big need, and justify it to our legislative body. Just based on the evidence that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, there doesn't seem to be enough evidence to suggest that, again, and you mentioned the conference too. That's a pretty robust conference, it sounds like, being held out in the private sector by a private organization, something that's not state sanctioned or sponsored.
Sorry, Dr. Quist.
There's an
Just,
amendment on the floor.
just a minute, just a minute. I'm all, who is 16? I'm gonna let you speak.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So I appreciate you, Doctor, taking the time to come here and testify to us today and tell us your version of events, especially during COVID, and take away time from the conference in Athens. My question for you, Representative Hilton, is there a representative from DCH here to speak on this bill, speak on this issue?
Great question. So I spoke with DCH this morning on it. They are neutral. They're not taking a position one way or the other.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, 17?
Thank you so much, Chairman. I just wanted to quickly make sure I've got the timeline confirmed. Established as a state-sanctioned authority in 2016. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
Okay to follow up.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll be quick. Fairly active until 2020, till the pandemic. Is that your understanding, Chairman?
Representative.
Okay.
No, yeah, don't elevate me yet.
Okay, sorry.
No.
I thought most of y'all were chairman.
Yeah.
You're making friends.
The only notes I had were that they hadn't met since 2020 in person, which we all know COVID, right? So I learned today, like you all did, they met virtually in 2021, which is fantastic. You may be able to speak more to how often you've met since 16. Again, in her testimony, it sounds like you got to meet 2 times. They didn't have the quorum, which was an issue, obviously. So,
Right.
yeah.
And then one last follow-up, if that's okay. So
Yes, ma'am.
this body made a decision, or correct me if I'm wrong, in 2016 that there was a need for this state-sanctioned authority. Is that right?
It appears so, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, 10 is Representative Ridley.
Yes, when they asked about the DCH, if there was a representative here, a lady in the back raised her hand. So if it is possible, I'd like to hear from them directly.
Yes, ma'am, come forward.
Oh, you're tall. Good afternoon. I'm Brandy Sylvan, Director of Government Relations with the Department of Community Health. I did speak with Representative Hilton this morning just to give him a heads up that Dr. Quest and I had spoken. I did want to make sure she was aware that this bill was circulating because she had expressed an interest to me in reconvening. I will say there were definitely struggles with getting the the quorum, but, I attribute that to a lot of the council members are, private practitioners. I believe there are 5 members of the council that are practitioners, 4 that are elected officials. It was definitely challenging to get the elected officials to participate. There is, to answer the question, that was not a slight to them. I think that was more on scheduling challenges. To answer your question about budget, there is no budget attached to the council. I do sincerely believe Dr. Quest is interested in actively getting the group back together and kind of moving forward with, primarily I think the task is to get resources out there to citizens, and there is a lot of information that they've put together and that's available on our website.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I'm going to ask Representative Hilton if you have anything to follow up, sir?
No, again, if it's the will of the committee, I'm happy to entertain. And I think we have a amendment
We
on the
do.
floor right now that needs to be
We
voted
do.
on. Yeah,
We do. All right, we have a motion and a second, and we've had discussion, so all in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign? No. Okay. All right, that amendment carries. All right, let's go back to the original bill. Do I hear a motion we accept the original Senate bill
as amended.
as amended? As amended. All right. By due pass. As a substitute. I'm sorry. I'm learning. All right, got a motion. Do I hear a second? Second. Got a second to the motion. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Oh, I'm sorry. I missed you. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, no, I just want, I'm sorry. Thank you, Jim. I just wanted to be clear because they didn't really clearly state the motion that we are voting due pass
As amended.
As amended.
as amended. That's the
correct.
substitute
That's
as
correct.
amended. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, all right. A new substitute. Okay, all right. Thank you. All right, so we, on the original motion, we're back to it, and all in favor, we voted on that? Okay,
No.
all right, sorry. I'm losing track, we've got so much going on. But, all right, that motion carries, and we'll go on to rules. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you. Code nerd. Just this. I hope this was like the best code meeting you've had.
You should say her hyphen.
Yeah. All right, we got one more bill to entertain, and, okay. All right, this is the annual cleanup bill that we always, that this committee is charged with every year, and this actually just takes care of obsolete or even grammatical or just any kind of issues that are not pertinent to today, what we have in subsequent laws today. So this we don't. Chairman Tyler Paul Smith was he's tied up in committee, so I'm gonna just present this bill. You've had a chance to look at it. Are there any questions on this bill? And this is certainly recommended by Legislative Council. This is, again, the annual cleanup bill recommended by Legislative Council.
I have a motion second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All right, any discussion on that motion?
It's okay.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign, and that motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance. I know there were a lot of other meetings going on, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.